close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport Podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star and I'm joined as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. On today's podcast we'll be joined by Skibbereen man Gordon Crowley to discuss stats and their place within the GAA. Gordon has been involved in statistical analysis for Galway county sides for the past decade, playing a part in 4 All-Ireland minor wins and under-21 victory, as well as being part of Anthony Cunningham's backroom team when the county reached the senior final in 2012. But first, Kieran, the GAA announced yesterday that the 2020 Inter-County Championships in hurling and football are highly unlikely to begin before the month of July. This news is not unexpected, but it still really brings home the reality that we may be facing into a summer without any GAA action at club or county level.
I think that's becoming more and more of a reality, Jack, that we mightn't get any GAA this season at all. Like we're talking July at the earliest, which is 10 weeks away. But with anything, it's a watching brief because we don't know what's happening from week to week. So the hope is that there will be GAA, but it won't be the way that we've known GAA for the last couple of years. They're talked about behind closed door games. Because if you think about the restrictions on large gatherings at the moment, how can you hold an inter-county game? You can't have 10,000-12,000 people in a stadium together. I can't see how that's possible this year. Think of an All-Ireland final with 82,000 in Croke Park. That won't happen this year. So I know they talked about social distancing, about reducing the number of spectators at games, but I don't see that happening either. So if it does go ahead, will it be behind closed doors? I don't know, because I don't know how that
even
works.
With behind closed doors, even with behind closed doors, there's no way social distancing can be adhered to. When you think about the size of inter-county panels and backroom teams, like you're talking about at least 30 players, all coming from different households in the most part. Then you've got the manager, his 2 to 3 selectors, physios, doctors, statsmen, nutritionists, sports psychologists, all sorts of members of a backroom team. So you're talking at least 50 realistically from each side, and then you have a referee and his 2 assistants, a 4th official, 4 umpires, Order of Malta ambulance service. Like you're upwards of 100 to 200 people just for one game. So unless the government kind of relieve some of the restrictions or revisit what social distancing actually means, it's just not a runner unless something drastically changes. Like I know they're talking in France of maybe relieving some of the restrictions in May, maybe opening some businesses, some non-essential businesses. So unless that's a success in the likes of France or Germany, where they're talking about similar actions, it's really hard to see anything happening here.
It is. You're dead right, Jack. Like I said, we just have to see how the next couple of weeks unfold, and we get to May 5th here in Ireland and see what the government decides to do then in terms of restrictions and where we go from here. But this concept of playing GAA games behind closed doors and sport in general behind closed doors, I just don't think it works, because you need the fans there. Let's say it's a club game, for example, if it's a Castlehaven against Carbery Rangers senior football game, and if that went ahead behind closed doors, it's not the same. It's the fans that make it. It's the atmosphere. It's the whole experience. It's the build up to the game. It just wouldn't be the same. So I wouldn't be a fan of behind closed doors. Like for reasons you've mentioned there, how it would work with social distancing, it kind of seems hard to kind of figure out as well. So a lot of questions at the moment. We might get the answers over the next couple of months, but I think we're starting to face up to the reality now that if sport returns and if the GAA returns, it will be late and deep into the summer. And to be honest, Jack, I think that club should come back before county, because I think you can manage club games a lot easier than you can manage inter-county games in terms of attendance and crowds alone. And as well as that, county players are club players anyway, so if the club team comes back first, all players will get a chance to play. I think if the GAA kind of prioritised inter-county game ahead of the club scene, I think that's a big mistake, because all the club players deserve the chance to play the game. And if you see how important roles that clubs have played during this whole kind of pandemic at the moment, GAA clubs helping out their local communities and so on. So it shows again that GAA clubs are at the heart of nearly every community in Ireland. So if there is going to be GAA this year, you'd hope it would be clubs first. Money talks, and there's big sponsorship deals here, and that's the one worrying concern, that the GAA hierarchy will prioritise inter-county over club, which I think is a mistake.
Just to touch on one sport or semi-sport that has been running behind closed doors, and that is World Wrestling Entertainment, professional wrestling in the United States. And interestingly, where most wrestlers are based in the United States is Florida, and the governor of Florida has redrawn the list of businesses that are deemed essential, and somehow wrestling was put onto that list because, as you say, money talks, and the World Wrestling Entertainment obviously pump a lot of money into the state of Florida. But they ran their marquee event of the year, WrestleMania, 2 weekends ago, maybe 2 weekends ago. So WrestleMania is their equivalent of the Super Bowl or the All-Ireland final or the World Cup final, etc., etc. And they ran it over 2 nights behind closed doors. And I don't know if you've ever watched a wrestling match in your life, but about 90% of what makes it entertaining is the reaction from the audience and the chants and the songs. And even though it's predetermined, so there's not really as competitive an aspect as there is to real sport, but the audience still plays a massive role. And it was an absolute damn squib. It couldn't have been any less enjoyable. And that's the world of wrestling. So for something like the All-Ireland Championship to come back in an empty Croke Park or an empty Páirc Uí Chaoimh or an empty Semple Stadium in Thurles, it would almost be like the Cork footballers playing Tipperary in Semple Stadium in a National League game or something to that effect. That's probably a good analogy to draw, because when those games go on in big stadiums and there's no one there, it's almost hard to watch. So if you were to put our best players behind closed doors, I would watch. Everyone would watch, but I agree with you. I'd rather see them prioritise the club game, get everyone out playing hurling and football as quick as they can to whatever degree that may be, but putting big championship games behind closed doors just to keep television companies and major sponsors happy just seems to me like it would be a tone deaf move at this stage. But look, as you said, it's an ever-changing situation. This time next week, we could be getting ready to preview the first round of the Munster Football Championship, for all we know. Highly unlikely, but nonetheless, it's just ever-changing. No one really knows anything from one day to the next. But we might just leave that there, Kieran, because I know you had a very interesting conversation with this week's guest, and that's Skibbereen man Gordon Crowley, who, as I mentioned earlier, has been involved from the stats side with various Galway inter-county teams over the past decade, and stats has obviously become a bigger part year on year in the GAA over the past decade, 20 years even. So it'll be interesting to hear what he had to say. You might just give us a bit of background on Gordon's role with the various Galway teams before we hear from him.
Yeah, we've followed Gordon's progress with Galway teams for the last couple of years. Gordon is a skative, and he's living up in Galway now, and he's been involved with Galway minor hurling teams that have won All-Ireland's under 21 teams, and the senior team under Anthony Cunningham that got to the 2012 All-Ireland final. So Gordon is a very experienced kind of performance analysis and statsman, and he knows, I suppose, the benefits of stats better than most. So Dennis Hurley had a chat with Gordon in a recent Southern Star edition. So I really enjoyed the piece that Dennis wrote, so I wanted to talk to Gordon as well, just about that and just about the growing role of stats in the GAA, and just to get his thoughts on the likes of how important is possession. The stat we see if you're watching a soccer match or a rugby game, and at halftime and full time you always see the graphics kind of shoot up about possession stats, shots on target, so on, and just to see what stats really do count, what stats don't matter at all, and to find out Gordon's favourite stat and different indicators in a game that can help a manager kind of make a change, kind of plot changes and so on. So very interesting man, Gordon, and it's a very interesting chat. So I think it'll enlighten us all, Jack, as to how important stats are in the game now. before we talk stats and performance analysis, Gordon, tell me how a Skibbereen man ended up working with the Galway Hurlers via Liam Mellows. So fill me in on, I suppose, that move from Skibbereen to Galway.
Yeah, I guess I went to college in UL, and after that I spent 2 years actually in Arklow and Wicklow. Played a little bit of hurling there, and after that, a job up in Galway. So when I came up to Galway, joined the Liam Mellows Hurling Club, a senior club here in the city, and got involved with them initially playing, and was kind of lucky enough to. I was probably an average hurler at best, and lucky enough to play senior for a few years with them. And then I was helping out with the senior teams, junior teams, the selector, and kind of when a young family came along, I kind of, I still wanted to be involved, still wanted to do something, still wanted to contribute, and wasn't going to be able to commit to being at training every night. So kind of in around 2010 or 11, started saying, okay, maybe I can do something on the analysis side to kind of help to support the seniors and the Liam Mellows seniors. And helped out, I guess, Brian, and Galway minor manager and former Westmeath manager at the time, and did that for a year or two with Brian. And Brian was involved with the Galway under-21s, so kind of stepped into that role with Brian. And Anthony Cunningham was over the under-21s at the time, won an All-Ireland in 2011, and then when Anthony Cunningham became senior manager, joined Anthony's backroom for a few years. And then Jeff Linsky from Liam Mellows became minor manager in 2015. So that became part of his backroom then, kind of doing the performance analysis side of things, and part of a successful minor setup there for the last number of years. So
had you always an interest in the kind of statistical analysis, so Gordon? Like, I know you said you were playing away and the family came along and you wanted to stay involved, but was it a part of the game or a facet of the game that you always had a keen interest in?
Yeah, it is, and I probably didn't realize it afterwards. I suppose I'm kind of, scientific background, so kind of numbers and data would kind of appeal to me anyway. And my dad saying one time when he was younger, he said, saying to me, like, he said, Jeannie, I can't the analysis. For people, it's all about the game, and for other people, it's all about the analysis. And I was in the former category, where a lot of the enjoyment is actually in the analysis of it afterwards.
Because you've been involved with Galway teams over the best part of a decade. Have you seen kind of, I suppose, the role and importance of performance analysis and stats kind of transform massively in those 10 years from where it was when you started to where it is now?
No, I mean, I suppose there's a better understanding of the process and how it goes, video or data, to it being contextualized, it being interpreted correctly, and allowing coaches to make valuable interventions. I think that's certainly grown, and along with the tools that are at coaches' disposal in terms of the and performance analysts' disposal in terms of the software that's used. Back 2010, 2011, you were driving to lads' houses on a Sunday night or a Monday night to get DVDs, or you were getting DVDs in the post from RT, and now they're available online to be downloaded straight away. You were the only way you could share content previously with the players was kind of a projector against the dressing room wall. Well, now players have apps, and they get specialized content shared with them the day after the match, where they can look at individual clips, they can look at instances of the game, such as scores, tackles, puck outs, etc. That's customized to them, and coaches can provide feedback on those platforms to them, etc. So the ability to analyze and share information has transformed massively, along with, I suppose, it's a relatively new area in a degree, because it's only 10 years old. So how the data is being used, I think it's become a lot more insightful as well.
Do you find that the players nowadays, they're very receptive to kind of this part of the game, that they're actually coming to you looking for the stats, looking for the analysis, to kind of to break down how they got on a game, I suppose, compared to 10 years ago when it was all new? But nowadays, I presume the players want that data, want that info off you.
Oh, they do, and listen, especially when you're dealing with kind of players at the elite level, that they're very hungry for data, and they're very hungry for feedback, and they see it as a essential part of the kind of learning process for them, and especially video content. Numbers, help to a degree, but people are visual learners, and if they can see it happening in front of them, and you're working with kind of almost a YouTube generation as well. They're used to looking at things. They're used to little clips, and when they can see it, it helps the coaching feedback. So much. It's such an easier conversation when you're showing somebody a video and you're saying, here, have a look at this. Why did you think you gave away this free? And a lot of the times the players will actually I would have seen since 2015 is that year on year the younger players coming through are more comfortable with the technology, and they're more comfortable with using it, and you have situations where over the last year or two where the players themselves are actually generating their own highlights clips. So we'll be giving them matches, they'll be pulling clips from them throughout the year, and then the management team will be encouraging them, okay, the night before the game, go back and look at all your positive clips. So you're filling their heads with positive mental images before the game, which is really important, and they do that very, very easily.
When it comes to stats, and this is me from someone from the outside kind of looking in, is there such a thing as a good stat and such a thing as a bad stat? And in terms of, let's say, possession, like you did an interview with Dennis Hurley in last week's Southern Star, and I was very interested when it came to possession, because you said that's a low value kind of stat, for want of a better word. Are there good stats and bad stats, Gordon?
Yes. I think the first thing you said, there's a great saying that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So you have to demonstrate a degree of insight and kind of experience when you're kind of looking at the numbers, and you're looking at things that kind of make a major impact on the game or on the performance. So you're trying to kind of weed out the signals from the noise. There's lots of noise there in terms of things that don't add any value, but you're looking for a signal, so something that's substantive, something that's useful, that's sustainable. So if you're looking at hurling over the last few years, look at elements of the game, which is the puck out, turnovers, shooting efficiency. So they're going to tell you an awful lot about kind of how you're playing the game. While possessions, and the example I was using is hurlers have fantastic possession rates. They don't necessarily dictate whether you'll win the game or not. Fundamentally, hurling is it's an invasion game that's based on turnovers. So who wins the turnovers, who wins most turnovers will usually, and that will be dictated in by your work rate. So it's puck out, turnovers, and work rate and shooting efficiency are the ones that you kind of look at straight away.
And I was very interested too when you said that the turnover is becoming the new playmaker in hurling, which is I'd never heard that before, but it's very true, and it ties in what you were saying there. Kind of the team that wins the most turnovers, they more likely will win a game.
Look at the likes of any of the teams over the last number of years that have won the All Ireland. The things that distinguish them is predominantly their work rate. And if you get situations where the forwards are working harder than the backs, those teams usually win. So you'd be looking at your forwards making almost 50% of your tackles, your midfielders maybe making 10, and your backs making 40%. But people have looked at over the last number of years the sources of scores. So when you talk about the turnovers, at senior inter-county level, about 60% of the scores will originate from a turn. About 30% will originate from your own puck out, and about 10% from the opposition puck out. So then it makes sense that when you're coaching the game and when you're setting up your team, that you're coaching the tackle, you're coaching the turnover. There was a study a couple of years ago. Damien Young and Collins published a study on kind of the playing dynamics of elite hurling, and it showed that the ball is play for an average of 28 seconds, and there's a phase of play more than 46 seconds, and there's a shot every kind of at most every 2 minutes. So it kind of shows that, you know, the game of hurling is short phases of intermittent, intense play that's defined by turnovers. And when you start thinking about the game in that, you know, in that context, from a coach's point of view, then they're looking at, okay, how do we set up to generate turnovers? How do we coach players? How do we set ourselves up that we're making the most out of them when we do turn over the ball? Because when you do turn over the ball, the defense is stabilized, etc. So, you know, all of those things are feeding into that, you know, that turnover, that work rate emphasis.
What's your favourite stat? So, what stat do you always like to hone in on? Like, have you a favourite stat? Kind of something that, like, a key indicator for you that tells if a team or a player is going well?
Yeah, work rate and turnover. It is, you know, it defines your attitude. You know, you could be there, you could be day of a match, and if you're collecting it in game, and you'd know 10 minutes in, okay, the attitude is good today. You know, if you're there and you're going tick 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 tick, and you're recording turnovers, and work rate and tackles, then you know. You know, the team is going to put in a performance, and then after that, it's probably, I think, shooting efficiency is, because shooting efficiency goes straight to the bottom line. You know, it kind of goes on the scoreboard. So, you know, you're looking at teams who have probably you know, maybe an intercounty level of like a 60% shooting efficiency. At club level, they'll have about a 55%, which is phenomenal when you think of it. You know, if you think of a club level, 1 in every 2 shots doesn't go over the bar. You know, at intercounty level, it's 60%. Seamus Callan last year for Tip, his shooting efficiency was 70%. You know, that was really, really high. You know, he also got 16 goals as part of that. So that's, you know, that shows his value in terms of it. Like, you know, you give him 10 balls and he's going to hit the target 7 times. And then it's, you know, feeding into that. It's, you know, who's shooting, where they're shooting from, how much time have they, etc. But yeah, so work rate and turnover, I'd say number 1, then shooting efficiency, and then, you know, puck outs, and how they're being managed would probably be after that for me.
When it comes to kind of a game, so kind of when the game is live and you're there at the stadium, how much of an input do you have on the game then in terms of your communication with the management team?
I suppose with the minors over the last number of years, I suppose we had our protocol for kind of feedback, and, you know, every team would be different in this regard, but we would have broken the game down in 10-minute rounds, and we would have given an update every 10 minutes on kind of key performance indicators for us, unless there was something exceptionally gone out of line, and then we'd report that, and then, you know, there'd be a debrief at half time, and again you go into the same protocol in the second half. So generally you'll be feeding back every 10 minutes, and you know, the sideline is kind of expecting that, and then you'd have an agreement that, you know, you'd be reporting on kind of, you know, major events. So, you know, a player has given away a third free or something like that. You know, that'd be an exceptional event that you'd kind of go, you flag that immediately then. So yeah, so there'd be a good bit of conversation in that regard during the match.
But again, I presume compared to 10 years ago when you started first to now, it's probably changed a lot more, kind of your input into a live game. Kind of, are managers more dependent now? Are they more looking for the up-to-date analysis, what happened in the last 10 minutes?
They aren't. I think a lot of the really good managers, what you'll see is they're very tuned into the game. You know, they live every ball. It's like they're plugged into the flow of the game. They feel everything, and so there's a lot of it that they, you know, there's a lot of it that they see already and they feel. So really, what you're kind of doing, I think, sometimes is you're providing a safety blanket, number 1, or an insurance policy that if there's something that they've missed, you may speed up their decision. So there might be something that they're thinking, you know what, we're not quite rightly set up on the puck out, or, our midfield isn't into the game, and they may not make action on it or take action on it for another 5 to 10 minutes, but you're accelerating that decision. And then sometimes you might be protecting them in terms of, coaches have biases just like everyone else. They might have some player that they're not quite sure of, and then he makes a mistake, or they might think of some guy that is lazy. But again, managers that and you have a good relationship with, and there's a high level of trust, you can actually intervene and say, look, I know he's not in the game. I'm sorry, I know he made a mistake, but he's actually doing okay. Leave him alone. And a lot of them is kind of speeding up their decision, I think,
Like just touching on something you said already, kind of when it came to the Cork Hurlers, in terms of they're up there with their possession most games, but that hasn't transferred obviously into success. That is really interesting, because when it comes to possession, even if you're thinking different sports, kind of when you have the ball, you think the team that has the ball more should win, but it just doesn't work like that in hurling. And like, is hurling different to the other sports in that sense, do you think, Gordon? Or
no, I think you'll see a lot of, and I'm not a big soccer fan or anything like that, but you'll see a lot of soccer games where teams will dominate possession, different dynamics in the game obviously, and not win. You can see Gaelic football games where teams they might be 50-50 in possession, but again it comes back down to, you look at Dublin footballers and how efficient they are with the ball. That there's a lot of those games where teams will create equal number of scoring chances, and it'll be the one who will actually be more efficient, get the ball into better scoring areas, will actually win. So possession is not a good indicator. It gives a certain amount of information at maybe a player level, because it can tell you whether a player is in the game or not. Like, and the example I used with Dennis, which was the kind of classic example, was from 2011, where Lar Corbett kind of had about 8 possessions and got 1-3, and was playing Peter Kelly, who had 16 possessions, and they were marking each other. And Peter Kelly would be probably on a normal day be coming off thinking, I had a really good game, I hit a lot of ball, but his man got the ball 8 times, got 1-3, and that's the winning of the game.
Final question, Gordon. As someone so involved in stats analysis and performance analysis, can you actually enjoy a game? Can you sit back when you're at a game, and even when you're not working for the game, and actually enjoy a game? Or is your brain always computing kind of the stats and figures? And do you know what I'm trying to say? Can you enjoy a match as a fan?
A game that you're analysing? No. There's people talking about the game afterwards, and you're going, no, I really don't. I don't have an appreciation of it, other than the kind of metrics that you're measuring. Games that you'd be kind of on duty for, no, you don't enjoy them. And funnily enough, the enjoyable bit is the Monday night after you've analysed it and you pulled the clips, and you might have pulled together a bit of a report, and you're going, oh yeah, right, I understand what's, that all makes sense now. But at a normal game, funnily enough, it actually can be really liberating, because you're not having to think. You'd still mark the scoring and the wides on the program, and maybe the frees and stuff like that. But that's only light stuff. But it feels like much more liberating, and you can just sit back and enjoy the flow of the game.
You never know. In a couple of years, you might come back down and help out the Skip Hurlers in the Junior B hurling championship. You might be the kind of missing ingredient to get him over the line.
Yeah, I know. I keep Colm, my brother, knows, well involved with them now this last few years. So I get frequent updates from them. All right.
Good stuff. Come here, Gordon. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
No, keep safe, Kieran. Good talking.
Good stuff.
Thanks for listening to the Star Sport Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to all things sport in West Cork. Don't forget to pick up this Thursday's Southern Star newspaper, including our award-winning sports section with everything a West Cork sports fan could want. In shops across West Cork and online from anywhere in the world via www.southernstar.ie/e-paper. The Southern Star and the Star Sport Podcast, #1 for sport in West Cork.
Welcome back to the Star Sport Podcast. And before we wrap up This week's episode, we're going to take a quick look at what's coming up in this week's Southern Star, which will be available in shops across West Cork from Thursday morning. So Kieran, what have you got lined up for us this week?
Plenty of good reading again this week, Jack. We have a 2-page interview with Cian O'Neill, the Cork football coach. I had a chat with him recently about his move to his reasons for joining the Cork senior football team. And Cian O'Neill is a very experienced coach. He's been involved with Mayo, Kerry, the Tip Hurlers, Limerick. He was manager of his native Kildare for 4 years, and he came aboard with the Cork senior footballers this year as a football coach. And chatting to some of the Cork footballers, they're really, really impressed with Cian O'Neill. They really like how his training sessions go, how he works, how he operates. So, like I said, I did chat with Cian just to get his thoughts on Cork football, where he can see this team going. And I asked him too, why did you want to join this Cork football team? And it turns out that he turned down the opportunity first, Jack, when Ronan McCarthy approached Cian O'Neill last summer to come on board. Cian said no first. He decided to take a bit of time out. He wanted to refocus and recalibrate after four years with Kildare. But Ronan McCarthy was pretty persuasive, came back in again, got his man, and it's working out well for both Cian O'Neill, Ronan McCarthy. The Cork footballers are after 5 wins in a row and topped Division 3 of the league before all GA activity was suspended. So, and we had seen kind of a lot of kind of shoots of encouragement during the league campaign that Cork were on an upward trajectory. That's a mouthful. Albeit it was Division 3 football. So it's a good interview with Cian O'Neill, and for anyone with an interest in Cork GA or just coaching in general, I think they'll learn a bit from this. Also, Orla Cronin is back this week, Jack, with another recipe. She's my stable in the Southern Star Sport diet these last couple of weeks. This week it's oat pancakes, and again, delicious looking. This is a breakfast brunch option. And she's putting together quite a collection at this stage, from her healthy banana bread to her chicken and chickpea curry to the oat pancakes this week to last week's rhubarb tart. So yeah, great stuff again by Orla. Also, our classic games this week focuses on the 2005 All-Ireland Ladies Senior Football Final. I've spoken to Rena Buckley about that game. That was the Cork Ladies' first All-Ireland Senior Football Final win, and it was a win that sparked a decade of dominance for the Cork Ladies football team. So it was great to catch up with Rena and just kind of get her memories from that 2005 win against Galway. And before they ran out onto Croke Park that day, their first time playing in Croke Park, the team got together, Jack, and they said a prayer. It was a spur of the moment prayer, is what Rena described it like. It was Our Father, and she said for no other reason. It wasn't kind of predetermined or orchestrated. It just felt like the right thing to do at the time before the game. They said a prayer, they went out, they won the game, and the rest is history. We've had a good interview with Jamie Wall in this week's Southern Star. Jamie is taken over as the Kilbrittain Intermediate hurling team manager. His first year as in charge of his home club, and he was dedicating everything towards that. It was his sole focus of the year, and obviously everything is kind of up in the air at the moment, but it's another good interview with Jamie Wall. He's always a very kind of interesting character to listen to, makes so much sense. So that's worth reading this week. Also, Ger McCarthy spoken to Cork Camogie player Saoirse McCarthy from Courcey Rovers, and to keep herself busy during the lack of GA action at the moment, Saoirse has painted her back wall at home in Ballinspittle the series of colours and graphics and so on. We have a picture of the wall, and it's pretty class, to be quite honest with you. So Saoirse's artistic talents are coming to the fore. We've also caught up with Phil Healy, Jack, because since we spoke to her last, the World Athletics have outlined the qualification process for next year's Olympic Games. So it's actually working out in Phil's favour, the new criteria that they've put in place, and we've all that in this week's Southern Star, and there's plenty more besides that, as well as another update on Pitch Perfect, Jack, which is going strong. It's my sporting highlight of the year so far, and the way it's going, it might be my sporting highlight of the entire year. And the polls are ongoing at the moment. We are in the last 16 stage, and there's been some absolute epic games. just to kind of refresh people's memories, this is our search to find West Cork's best GA pitch / playing surface, and 32 clubs started out, 26 from Carbery and 6 from Beara, and we're now well into the last 16. It kicked off last Saturday with a last 16 tie between Castlehaven and Carbery Rangers, and it just so happened, Jack, that Castlehaven and Carbery Rangers should have played last Sunday in Skibbereen in the first round of the new County Premier Senior Football Championship. But obviously, like I said, all GA activities is suspended at the moment. So the look of the draw had the two clubs meet in the last 16 tie in pitch perfect, and sparks flew. There was nearly 2,400 votes, which is incredible. I've heard of campaigns in both clubs to persuade other people to vote for them. It actually swung back and forth throughout the day, and at one point on Saturday evening, Castlehaven led 58-42 in terms of percentages in the poll, or 59-41, and it looked like Ross were out for the count. Then all of a sudden, the polls go on till 2 a.m. in the morning. The Ross comeback came. It was like a final quarter surge. It was goal after goal after goal, and they eventually pipped them by a couple of percent. And it was incredible. It was really, really entertaining. And since then, Randallogue got the better of Skibbereen in extra time. We had Clonakilty and St. Mary's have progressed to the quarterfinals, and the polls are ongoing at the moment as well. So in the absence of live kind of on-field activity, Pitch Perfect is definitely keeping me entertained, and at the moment over 10,500 votes have been cast in the 2 weeks to date, which is incredible. So big thanks to all the people who voted and all the clubs for taking part and lending their support to a novel idea that's keeping us all entertained.
Absolutely, Kieran, and as we mentioned earlier, that's going to be in shops across West Cork and far beyond from Thursday morning. And if you can't make it to the shops for whatever reason, we can deliver a copy of the Southern Star to your door via a postal subscription. In order to avail of such a subscription, all you have to do is call 028 212 00 and we'll organise, as I said, for the Southern Star to be delivered to your front door. Or if you want it delivered to your email inbox and you want to avail of a digital subscription, just log on to southernstar.ie/e-paper and you can read the Southern Star on your computer, tablet or smartphone for less than €2 per week. And the digital edition is served up in exceptional quality, so you won't miss out any of the resolution from the photographs or anything like that. It's a great product. So as I said, if you can't make it to the shops, pick up a postal or digital subscription. And Kieran, before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on something you were saying there, the absence of live sport. How have you been getting your exercise in over the last number of weeks? Obviously, we're being encouraged not to do too much running or walking more than 2 kilometres from our own homes, but what has sparked within you in order to keep fit and keep the head straight during this unusual time?
If you're looking for silver linings in all of this, Jack, I suppose we are home a lot more now. We're getting to spend more time with our loved ones, and I've always been kind of up and down between West Cork and home, and so I'm home now a lot more at the moment, and we're getting to go for walks kind of every night at 9 o'clock on the buzzer. Go for like a 4k walk, which is we have a nice route, kind of 2k one way and then obviously 2k back. So that kind of daily walk is actually great for the head, because you just need a bit of exercise, because you need to keep the brain engaged, and you just need to kind of keep fit and active and at the time. So we do our daily walk, and then we go home and we binge on Tiger King. So it's kind of, it's good. One thing is good for the mind, the other thing then is just bad for the brain, you know. But yeah, it's just trying to keep active, getting walks in and so on. So yeah, kind of, you yourself, you've built a home gym. I hear, Jack, you want to fill us in on that?
Well, I've been keeping very busy with my my extracurricular activities. We converted a garage into a home gym. We've got a boxing bag, free weights, kettlebells that we borrowed from a local gym that's obviously unfortunately shut during the current lockdown. But I also built a bar this week for the garden. We've called it the COVID bar, made out of pallets. So that's kind of keeping us entertained. I also got a skateboard delivered in the post, and I always I used to have a skateboard when I was younger, but I was never able to do any tricks, and I always said one day I would learn how to do an ollie. Do you know, it's the first trick you learn if you're skateboarding properly, but it's when you get all 4 wheels off the ground while keeping your feet on the board. I'm sure you've seen it maybe in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or any of those PlayStation and Xbox games. But on Good Friday, I said to myself, I'm going to learn how to ollie on a skateboard. And I stayed outside in the front garden of my girlfriend's house, and I tried to ollie for the bones of 5 or 6 hours, and I managed to land an ollie. It felt like the holy grail of skateboarding. Now the world is my oyster. I can do anything because all other tricks come from the basic ollie. So that's how I've been keeping myself sane, learning new skills, building bars, and perfecting the ollie.
Given the lack of live sport at the moment, that could actually make front page in the next couple of weeks. So if you can get a good picture for me, I'll definitely keep it in mind, Jack, because live sport is very thin on the ground, and a video or a picture of you ollieing on your skateboard at home it's worth its weight in gold at this stage. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to get it a bit better, a bit cleaner, get a bit more elevation, just so the picture really looks chef's kiss. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast. This week we'll be back on Friday with the next edition of our classic game series. As Kieran mentioned, it's the 2005 All-Ireland Ladies Football Final. If you enjoy these shows, make sure to rate, review and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, Stitcher or wherever else you listen to the show.